Hello everyone, MarshW13 here with another Vegas dining review. And tonight we find ourselves at yet another one of Michael Mina's several on-strip establishments. This one a steakhouse called STRIPSTEAK on Restaurant Row at the Mandalay Bay. And I can say confidently that STRIPSTEAK is by far the hottest, most in-demand restaurant at this property, as evidenced by the packed house and long lines. On a Friday at 7 p.m., walk-ups are being told to expect a 2 to 3 hour wait. And the fact that we're visiting Vegas in the midst of the pandemic when demand remains suppressed makes this level of traffic all the more surprising. There was some open seating at the bar, but no guarantees, and bar seating of course carries with it the increased risk of disease transmissibility. So I think it's clear that table reservations are an absolute must at STRIPSTEAK, particularly on Friday nights. Now, as for my first impressions, it's a very dark restaurant on the interior and quite noisy, much like other Michael Mina properties, the noise emanating mostly from the diners themselves. I was offered tap water, to which I assented, and I was a bit taken aback not to have received a hard upsell on bottled water, which is typical at a nice restaurant. Overall, the service was hectic, but the waitress was friendly and attentive. At any steakhouse, the drink menu is very important, and this one features a selection of both traditional and not-so-traditional cocktails and beers, along with a short but diverse list of wines that, when it comes to the reds, is dominated by some big-name labels from Napa Valley. Definitely acceptable offerings here. As for the food, there is much more to STRIPSTEAK than mere steaks. There's actually a lot of seafood on offer, as well as a slew of Asian-influenced appetizers and small plates, including sushi and robatayaki. You have a number of modern takes on some classic salads and starters, again, many with an Asian flair. The entrees heavily emphasize steak, but of course there are poultry and fish dishes as well. The steak selection is dominated by domestic and international Wagyu beef, with only one Kobe option from Japan, which is sold by the ounce, and there are also some slightly cheaper non-Wagyu cuts from the American heartland. Yes, these are expensive steaks ranging from $60 to $200 in price, and of course everything is a la carte, so the steak items include just the meat on a plate, and at the bottom of the page there are a number of fun toppings, accompaniments, and sides that can be ordered separately. I elected to start the night with a glass of champagne, a Collet, which is a slightly lesser-known producer of a very traditional champagne blend, and it arrived in an attractive glass that truly showcases the bubbles. From the nose, you get a concentration of characteristic champagne brioche with bubblegum, a hint of cherry, and a minerally vegetal undercurrent. Combined with baking spice notes, the champagne really reminds me of a stroll through a classic European Christmas market. On the palate, it was a bit lighter, thinner, and cleaner. Overall, I found it a bit more astringent and drier than other blue champagnes. The French fries were an interesting complimentary appetizer delivered as a sort of poor man's amuse-bouche to all of the tables. They were perfectly crisp for the most part, although I eventually found that some were more done than others, and the seasoning was rather uneven. I think French fries sort of make sense in a steakhouse. It was just a bit weird to serve them by themselves to begin the evening. At the bottom of the ramekin is some sort of truffle butter, which is decent if you're a truffle fan, but a bit sparse and nothing spectacular. I ordered a Caesar salad, which, based on the description, I certainly expected to be a rather whimsical take on a classic, exactly what you'd expect from a chef like Michael Mina. And indeed, it arrived somewhat deconstructed, starting with the dressing, which was lighter and saltier, but with a beautifully fresh yet mayonnaise base that was quite pleasing. I wasn't a huge fan of the tempura anchovy, which, aside from its overwhelming salty and slight fishiness, was kind of like a fish stick in flavor and consistency. I think I prefer my anchovies more integrated into the dressing like a traditional Caesar, but hey, it was a unique touch, and no one comes to Vegas to experience the mundane. Similarly, I found the garlic streusel unique, but it just didn't work that well in the end. Nonetheless, the fundamentals of this salad were quite strong. The greens were beautifully fresh, the portion size generous. The main event consisted of a 12-ounce Wagyu New York strip ordered medium rare, and I gotta tell you, this was one succulent piece of meat, well marbled and fattier than your average New York strip. cooked fairly precisely to medium rare, and it wasn't overly charred on the outside to an extreme level, unlike my experience at another Michael Mina restaurant, Bar de Boisserie at the Aria. In fact, it was on the verge of undercooked, but in the end outstanding, just seasoned to perfection. I found the pepper and some of the other garnishes a weird addition, didn't really complement the dish. Now, is it worth the $100 price tag? Hard to say, but at around 3 times the price, I'm not sure I'd say it was 3 times as good as a typical restaurant steak. Any steak dinner is incomplete without an outstanding starchy side. And as for this baked potato with Gouda cream, or Gouda as we say in the Netherlands, it was heavenly. The cream wasn't that extraordinary. It really just tasted like an outstanding sour cream and chive baked potato that I probably could have made at home. But it went really well with both the steak and the wine. And speaking of the wine, to accompany the main course, I'd selected a Faust Napa Cabernet. The bouquet was beautiful, bursting with vanilla and floral perfume. Like many other cabs, it proved quite powerful, although not as tannic or full-bodied as some other Napa cabs. I would have found it quite sippable on its own, but of course it was amazing with the beef as well. The dessert menu at STRIPSTEAK is certainly interesting. I wish I could have tried the warm beignets trio, as it comes highly recommended, but it was really intended for 2 and I was 1. There are also a number of unique after-dinner cocktails to choose from. I always end fine meals with a cappuccino, and this one was no different. The foam often overtakes the coffee, but this espresso was deep and dark, just a perfect balance of bitter and roasted flavors. I had very little room for dessert, but I forged ahead with a banana tarte tatin. Of course, a traditional tarte tatin is basically an upside-down apple pie. Essentially, here the apple is replaced with an unorthodox ingredient, giving the overall impression of a candied banana that you might encounter in Latin or Asian cuisines. The dessert was really elevated by the caramel sauce, although the citrus element was nearly undetectable. So what do I think in the end? Well, it's a dark, very loud restaurant, almost more consistent with a Chili's than with fine dining. But after all, this is not a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. The service was just okay. I felt I had an above-average and very organized waitress, but she had very little knowledge concerning the food or wine, and one could detect a great deal of stress in general on the service at this restaurant. The food had a number of misses, from the unbalanced deconstructed design of the Caesar salad to the odd French fry amuse-bouche. Of course, the steak and the dessert were excellent, and the menu featured a fairly intriguing selection with a diversity of meat cuts and origins. While nothing here is cheap, the prices are well within expectation and comparable to other steakhouses in the Las Vegas Strip. And if it's true that the people vote with their feet and their wallets, STRIPSTEAK is an undisputed winner. Since I'm far from a steakhouse connoisseur and given some of its shortcomings, I can't give an unqualified recommendation for this restaurant, but if you're a steak lover staying on the Strip, this may be your best bet. Until next time, good eats and happy travels. March W13 out.